She's the worst, downright evil ruler SimNation has ever had. Lady Victoria Thebe. Not to be confused with Madame Victoria Levine, a wealthy socialite of the 1800s who killed and tortured her slaves. More on that later. Anyway, Lady Victoria, or Queen Victoria Thebe, daughter of Queen Mary and Thomas VII, who led a violent Catholic Reformation against the land grabs, and was among the first to be accused of being a believer. Thought to be among the top most evil queens in history. She spent her long 40-year reign developing a fearsome reputation of sending many Protestants to the village's creature, constantly raising tax prices on the kingdom, and justified or unjustified, her love for murder. But is that all there is to know about Victoria Thebe? Well, stick with us today, and we'll learn about Victoria's unhappy upbringing and a troubled reign plagued by personal and political disappointments. Princess Victoria was the first surviving child of King Thomas VII of SimNation and Mary, Queen of Tartosa. When Victoria came into the world on February the 12th, 1464, her father welcomed her as the greatest pearl in the kingdom. As proud as Thomas might have been, he rarely showed affection to his daughter. The king was more interested in using Victoria as a diplomatic pawn in the complex game of alliances that had engulfed early Tartosa, Salani, and Windenburg. When Victoria was just 2 years old, she was betrothed to Prince of Tartosa, Malcolm Whistledown III. This wedding arrangement, among two infants, was all kinds of inappropriate, and it was intended to secure an alliance between Windenburg and Tartosa. 4 years later, diplomatic relations between the two kingdoms soured, and the cringe factor just escalated. The 6-year-old, Victoria, was now offered in marriage to her father's cousin, the Holy Windenburgian Emperor Charles V, who was aged 22. The marriage never took place, but Victoria's mother, Mary, wanted to ensure that Victoria would be raised as a proper princess, worthy of an emperor. Victoria received private lessons in the science of religions and, therefore, was tutored by Matthias Smith, a village schoolhead who outlined her curriculum on a religion that was based in her family for generations, called Worship of the Watcher. And this belief was shunned upon by various kingdoms, villages, even the fly on the wall. The Worship of the Watcher states that some Sims believe that they are not alone, that they are In fact, never alone, but always under the mighty eye of the Watcher. Fickle and unpredictable is the Watcher. At times, looking on with fondness and granting Sims their every whim and desire. Other times, casting an angry eye onto their lives, removing crawlers from the swimming water, breaking marriages, or pushing them to work on a skill to exhaustion. Some days, a Sim will turn to the sky and wave in despair to ask for their needs to be met, only to receive no answer. And other times, their prayer will be heard. Benevolent or merciless is the Watcher. Of course, Sims that believe in it do their best to attract to themselves its more generous side. They try to behave as well as they can and clean their trenches instead of leaving them on the trestle. They believe that the Watcher likes to see them create. Therefore, creativity is their favoured way to honour their deity. They see occult creatures as a form of evil, for they embody the darker sides of the Watcher. They are, therefore, instantly uncomfortable near vampires, aliens, spellcasters and mermaids. Of course, human evil and mean Sims also make them uncomfortable. Now, here's what you need to understand. Not only was this religion frowned upon by most, it was downright illegal to be a part of it. Those who expressed ideology in there being life beyond ours and occultism were subsequently hanged. But since Lady Victoria was queen and ruler of nations, she could express whatever ideology she wanted, believe in whatever she wanted, with no prosecution. And that brings us to our next part of the story. The Believer Trials, not to be confused with the Spellcaster Trials, which took place in 1692. The Believer Trials were a series of hearings that lasted centuries. If found guilty of such notion, you were to appear in court. Should you decide to plead guilty or not, the judge would always send you to death. However, by the 1800s through to the 1960s, the punishments for being accused of the crime became more humane. Now, in Victoria's case, she wasn't technically accused like everyone else, as she expressed her beliefs in it publicly. Victoria prioritized religion above all else, implementing reforms and restrictions aimed at restoring the land grab's ascendancy in the country, and in any few attempts to stop them from trying to colonize her land. Protestants in her kingdom who opposed her beliefs were burned at the stake or sent to the village creature. Most controversially, she ordered 680 Protestants to the pit. On average, it's even said that she was executing 5 people a day. When a public execution was held, it was mandatory for the whole village to gather and watch as the creature attempted to eat the Protestant. There'd be few times where that unlucky Protestant would escape the creature's grasp, leaving Victoria angered. If that Protestant survived the creature's mouth of death, Lady Victoria would have them ordered to what she referred to as the torture chair. Sims placed in this chair had their hands and feet bound and were subject to numerous inhumane practices of torture. Furthermore, this chair was also used on Sims Victoria thought to be spies in her kingdom. Spies from rivaling kingdoms. If you were suspected, Victoria would put you in the chair, demanding you to fess up, torturing it out of you even. Once you did, or didn't, you were to be sent to the pit, to your demise. It's known that Lady Victoria Illustrious was, in fact, the worst queen of the nation, but there's also something important she must be held to a high regard for. Victoria is responsible for SimNation being known as one. One kingdom, one democracy, but with different countries, and here's why that is. From 1000 BC to 1492, SimNation consisted of only one single land, Windenburg. Tartosa, Salani, and all else were their own separate countries with their own rulers. Throughout her reign, Victoria sought to gain control of these other countries. She expressed that she felt as though the world operating on separate wheels just wasn't ideal. She made an offer to the Salvadoranian people and granted them 800,000 simoleons to get their land. The natives would still be able to keep their land, have their own culture, of course, but they were to be under the ruling of Victoria. At that time, Salvadorada, as beautiful as it is, was a very poor country. So they thought it best to accept the generous offer Victoria laid out to them. Now, at the time, there was a war. Salvadorada and Salani were at odds for hundreds of years, and they began sending troops into each other's countries. This war began before Victoria purchased the land, and as a result, Victoria offered a resolution. SimNation, as small as it was at the time, was still the most powerful nation, loaded with money, thanks to the land grabs. Pretty soon, more and more countries began to join in the war, but it all hit a tipping point when the country of Tartosa sent troops into Windenburg. This enraged Victoria, as she did not want to get involved in the conflict. And here's where her solution formed. She announced that each and every country that participated in the war would not face the disastrous consequences of trying to pick a fight with her kingdom if they joined forces and offered up their land for millions of simoleons. Now, like I said, at the time, SimNation was stacked with money. You'd be a fool not to consider taking it. Upon hearing Victoria's ultimatum, Tartosa soon joined SimNation, followed by Solani and a few others. These were the main two nations Victoria wanted to have. She wanted more, but some countries valued their culture instead of money, stating that they shan't ever give up their land for any price of fortune. Victoria promised not to have these countries blown off the map if they were to leave hers alone. And they did. In 1514, the reign of Victoria would come to an abrupt end. In July of 1514, Her Excellency was diagnosed with a severe case of llama flu and had been bedbound for 4 months. On December 23rd, 2 days before Winterfest, at just 52 years old, Victoria succumbed to her illness and died surrounded by her loved ones. Some believe her death was a Winterfest miracle. Others believe it was the final hurrah for 40 years of a grand reign. The throne then went to Victoria's younger sister, Elizabeth Thebe I. Which, if you didn't know, Elizabeth III is a direct great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter of Elizabeth I. And with that, Princess Cordelia Thebe is Queen Elizabeth I's great-great-granddaughter. That's a lot of greats. Throughout her reign, Elizabeth was constantly compared to her deceased sister. These comparisons ranged from good to bad, praise and hate. It is undeniable, nonetheless, that the persecutions Victoria instigated are one of the darkest pages in Simlish history. Victoria is remembered for an unjust and unjustified repression of other religion expressions which eventually turned against her. Yet she is never remembered for her efforts in forming our country into what it is known as today. I'm not suggesting that Victoria's reign should never be remembered as bloody, but is it fair to single her out as such? Or would it be fair to reassess her legacy? I'm looking forward to hearing your verdict in the comments below. And as usual, thank you for watching. I'll see you all next time.